Welcome to chapter 4 of the book of Malachi, or messenger, if you will. In the Greek, it's a messenger. His name is not in the Greek, but as I mentioned, in the Hebrew, we have the word Malachi, but that means messenger. It wasn't his personal name. Chapter 4, it begins, I'll read a little in the Greek, and then we'll go through the chapter. Theoti idou imera erkete kaiomeni os klivanos ke flexi avtus ke esonte pantas I alloganis ke pantas I piuntas onoma kalami ke anapsi avtus I imera I erchomeni legi kyrios Dinamion, ke umi ipolif thi afton riza ude kalima. The great day of the Lord Almighty, for behold, a day comes. Now, we've had the day of the Lord in many places, so I'm not going to go too much into that day. It was in the first 3 chapters of this book and other places throughout the Bible and the book of Revelations, a day, and it's basically a burning. And right here it says, burning as an oven. Revelation 9:2, it says, and he opened the well of the abyss, and ascended smoke from out of the well, as smoke of a furnace burning. And the sun and the air were darkened by smoke of the well. So this day shall blaze against them and the ones that are there. And all the foreigners will be, and all the ones doing lawless deeds, as stubble. The word alloganis here appears in the Hebrew as ones doing wickedness. But the Aldine and the 16, I believe, have the Allophiles, which is the Philistines or Palestinians today, but the Hebrew and the Complutensian have foreigners. And they're going to be all the ones doing lawless deeds as stubble. They'll be burned. And the day coming shall light them, says the Lord of the forces, and in no way shall there be left of them root nor vine branch. I believe this is a portent of a future time when the rapture will have already had taken place, or the snatching away into heaven, however it will be, and the only unbelievers are basically left, but there will be those that decide to follow Jesus in that time. Right now we're living in a time of grace, the free gift. We don't have to follow the Mosaic laws, only the law of Christ, which is to love our neighbor as ourselves and love God. And so this time, I believe, is a time of the tribulation, and in no way shall there be left of them a root nor vine branch. And as far as the root or the vine branch, it says in John 15:5, I am the great vine. You are the vine branches. The ones abiding in me and I in him, this one bears much fruit. For apart from me, you are not able to do anything. And thus, I believe Israel today. And at this time of the tribulation, without Jesus, they won't be able to do anything unless what God allows them to do. Verse 2, and to you, I crossed out O and made it the ones, which is correct, better than the O ones. And to you, the ones, fearing my name, shall arise Son of Righteousness, and healing is in his wings. The Son of Righteousness. Now, it's not S-O-N, but the S-U-N, the sun that burns. Matthew 13, 43, it says, "Then the just ones shall shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father." So the arising of the Son of Righteousness could be us, or in Matthew 17:2, it says, "And Jesus, he transformed in front of them, and his face radiated as the sun, and the garments of his became white as light." And so that was the Son of Righteousness shall arise. Healing is in his wings, and we know Jesus healed many people. And it mentions in Luke 13:32, "And he, Jesus, said to them, having gone, you tell to the fox this," that was Herod the king, "Behold, I cast out demons and complete works of healing today and tomorrow, and in the third day I am perfected. And then you shall come forth and shall leap as young calves, being spared from out of bonds." I believe that's a description of what's called the rapture, the harpazo, the grabbing away, snatching away like an eagle. In Luke 6:23, it says, "Rejoice in that day and leap." Exactly right here as it says in Malachi. "For behold, your wage is great in the heaven." We won't suffer the things that the lawless ones will. In verse 3, it continues, "And you shall trample the lawless ones," and how, if it's talking about us, others that are in heaven, coming back, trampling them, and they will be as ashes underneath your feet in the day which I prepare, says the Lord Almighty. Now, ashes underneath our feet, they'll be burnt, or is that a figure of speech? That they will be as ashes, as nothing under our feet. God has put us above them, and whatever purpose he has for us to do, we will do it in that time. And then verse 4, "Remember the law of Moses, my bondman." Now, who is he talking to here? Not talking to the church Christians, he's talking to the Jews. And what Jews could he be talking to today? Israel. And he's directed this words to Israel. "Remember the law of Moses, my bondman," because it's in the Old Testament. "Insofar as I gave charge to him in Horeb for all Israel," orders and judgments which they are not following today, basically. Then in 5, it changes. It goes into Elijah. And it begins, "And behold, I will send to you Elijah, the prophet, before the coming day of the Lord," that terrible time, "of the great and the apparent." And then it mentions his name as the Tishbite, 6 places in the Old Testament out of about 75 mentions of the name of Elijah, which is interesting. Right here, in the Aldine and the 16 editions, it has the Tishbite, but here in the Complutensian and the Hebrew, it has prophet. The person of Elijah is mentioned basically in 1 Kings chapters 17, 18, 19, and 21. Along with 2 Kings 1, 2, and 3, where the word Elijah is mentioned. Elijah was a prophet, and he was famous for putting to death the prophets of Baal, who were prophets that were put in place by Jezebel, king of Ahab's wife, King Ahab's wife. And this is mentioned in 1 Kings 18, verses 18 to 46. You can read the story of the prophets of Baal and Elijah. And then this story is quoted by Paul in the New Testament in Romans 11, 2 to 4. Then in James 5:17, it says about Elijah, "Elijah was a man having the same passions as us, and with prayer he prayed for it not to rain, and it rained not upon the earth for 3 years and 6 months. Now, what happened to Elijah that he would be bringing him back? Was he dead? Well, no, we'll go into the story of what happens to Elijah. And it says, and it came to pass of their going and speaking, and that would be Elijah and Elisha, that behold, a chariot of fire and horses of fire, and they drew apart between both, that is Elijah and Elisha. And Elijah was taken up in a rumbling into the heaven. And Elisha was beholding, and he yelled out, Patir, Patir, Arma Israel, O Father, the chariot of Israel and his horsemen. And he did not see him any longer. And he, Elisha, took hold of his garments and tore them into two, and he raised up high the sheepskin of Elijah, which fell on top of him as it went up. And Elijah turned and stood upon the edge of the Jordan, and he took the sheepskin of Elijah, which fell on top of him, and struck the waters, and said, Where is the God of Elijah now? And he struck the waters, and they tore apart here and there, and Elijah passed over. Well, you can continue with this place in 2 Kings 2, and then the prophets want to go out and try to find Elijah. Maybe he was sent someplace else. People thought that Jesus now was Elijah because they knew Elijah was to return. Now, this is mentioned in Matthew 16:14, Luke 6:15 and 8:28, and Luke 9:8. Then we see about Elijah next in the New Testament, where it goes into the transfiguration, and it says, starting in 17:1 of Matthew, down to 13, and after 6 days Jesus takes with himself Peter and James and John, his brother, and bears them unto a high mountain in private, which I believe is Mount Meron, by the lake of Galilee. And he was transformed in front of them. And his face radiated as the sun, and the garments of his became white as the light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them with him, conversing together. Then responding, Peter said to Jesus, O Lord, it's good for us to be here if you want. We should make here 3 tents, to you one, to Moses one, and to Elijah one. And yet of his speaking, behold, a cloud, giving light, overshadowed them. And behold, there was a voice from out of the cloud, saying, This is my Son, the beloved, in whom I take pleasure in. Hearken to him. And the disciples, hearing, fell upon their face, and were fearful exceedingly. And coming forward, Jesus touched them and said, Arise, be not fearful. And having lifted up their eyes, they beheld no one except Jesus only. And of their going down from the mountain, Jesus gave charge to them, saying, Not to one should you tell the vision until of which the Son of Man should rise up from out of dead ones. And his disciples asked him, saying, Well, why then do the scribes say that Elijah must come first? Then Jesus answering said to them, Elijah indeed comes first and will restore all, but I say to you that Elijah already came, and they did not recognize him, but did to him as much as they wanted. So also the Son of Man is about to suffer by them. Then the disciples perceived that concerning John, the one immersing, he spoke to them. So Jesus is telling them that John had come in the person, Elijah had come in the person of John, but that's more of a figure, a metaphor, because we find out where there's way more to this story about Elijah. And at the crucifixion, what we see where it changes a little, and it's in Matthew 27, verses 47 and 49. It says, And from the 9th hour, Jesus on the cross, that is, yelled out with a great voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you abandoned me? Now, Eli, Eli sounds like Elijah, but it wasn't. It says, and some of the ones standing there having heard said that, well, this one calls Elijah. And the rest said, let's go. We should see if Elijah comes delivering him. And this story is also in Mark 15:35 on. It mentions about John in Luke 1:17 as the angel talks to Zacharias in the temple before John is born. And the angel says, and he, that is John, shall go before him, that is Jesus, in spirit and power of Elijah, to turn hearts of fathers unto children, and ones resisting persuasion to the intelligence of the just ones, to prepare to the Lord a people being carefully prepared. So that was the angel to Zacharias. Then we find out again more about John, and this is in John 1:19-25, John the disciple. And this is the witness of John, that is the one immersing, when the Jews sent from out of Jerusalem priests and Levites that they should ask him, who are you? And he acknowledged and denied not. And he acknowledged that I am not the Christ. And they ask him, well, what then? Are you Elijah? And he says, I am not. Are you the prophet? And he answered, no. And they said to him, who are you that an answer we should give to the ones having sent us? What say you concerning yourself? And he said, quoting Isaiah, I am a voice yelling in the wilderness, straighten the way of the Lord, as said Isaiah the prophet. And the ones being sent were from out of the Pharisees, and they asked him and said to him, well, why then do you immerse if you are not the Christ, nor Elijah, nor the prophet? You can read more about that in the first chapter of the book of John. Then in Matthew 11:14, Jesus says, and if you want to receive, he, as John, is Elijah, the one about to come. Now we'll go back to our text. And then it continues in a quotation of the one who shall restore the heart to the Father, of the Father to the Son in Luke 1:17, and then, and the heart of a man to his neighbor, lest coming I strike the earth entirely. And so this is the last we hear of Elijah, except for one place which some people believe is referring to Elijah, and that would be the book of Revelations, chapter 11, verse 3, where it talks about the two witnesses who come and prophesy in the holy city, it says, and they are ended up being killed, and their bodies are laying in the city for 3 days, and then their bodies are raised up and they went to heaven. It doesn't say who the two were. It says it gives certain hints. You can go and look in Revelation 11 and find out more about these two witnesses. That's more than what we're going to go into this chapter, but some people think the one is Elijah and possibly the other is Moses, because it does talk. He talks about them about witnessing in the Mountain of Transfiguration. Jesus does. And so that's a possibility. Elijah also is more probable than Moses, but Moses is a good second choice. Some people think it was Zerubbabel, who was another person that was talked about, the two branches, oil branches going into a tree, and I'm not sure where that is, if that's in Nehemiah, might be. And then other people think other one might have been Enoch, who didn't die and was transposed and taken up into heaven. So we don't really know which one it was. But this ends the book of Malachi, and we will continue on with the prophets, but we'll take a short detour in the next video, just one subject, and that's going to be what I classify or titled the eschatological timeline. And that is a timeline that I have seen, but I'm going to try to bring out this timeline, this eschatological timeline, using the words that are in the Bible itself and just pointing them out as the subject. And so the next video will be on that, the eschatological timeline. I hope you join us. Till the next time, God bless.